as of this podcast being produced in October 2019, Instagram and Facebook are currently conducting an international experiment in a selected number of countries in which they are now hiding the total number of likes that posts have on them. Depending on where you are in the world, you may currently be seeing this new form, which on Instagram will come up as Mariah, Jeff, and others like this post, for example, instead of the usual Mariah, Jeff, and 110 others like this post, or just saying 110 people like this post. The key part of this and others part is they aren't completely hiding who has liked it, but you now have to click on the others part to see all the users who have liked the post. It's that 2 steps removed instead of just being straight in your face. While this is still in experiment mode and not a concreted change yet, it's most likely been influenced by the growing understanding of the mental and emotional dangers that come with comparing ourselves to others based on this single number like system. Eva Chen, who is the director of fashion partnerships of Instagram, recently commented on this in an interview with Yahoo Finance, saying, and quote, "Put yourself in the shoes of a 15-year-old who spends like an hour thinking about what she wants to post, and then she doesn't get the number of likes that she wanted, and so she might take it down or feel self-conscious." End quote. Now, despite Chen's reluctance to actually mention the words anxiety or depression or low self-esteem here, this may still be a healthy step for our social media platforms to take. While there is definitely a good number of scientifically backed reasons why we should be pointing the finger at social media for their social responsibility here, to make them the scapegoat for all of our issues of mental health and wellness actually is doing ourselves a disservice as well. It suggests that the control of our own ability to thrive is completely out of our hands, and this isn't true. One of the big areas that contributes to how we feel about ourselves is based on where we choose to get our validation. Welcome to Redlily Radio. Radio. To better understand how all this validation stuff works in our brains, let's first look at one of the neurochemical components which makes it up, dopamine. Now, chances are that you've heard the name dopamine mentioned somewhere along the way if you're someone who gets into psychology and things like that. And this is because dopamine is one of the most potent chemicals in our brain that drives our motivation. When we get a boost of pleasure from doing a certain activity, it's often because it actually releases a hit of dopamine in our brains. This is the case for when we have good food, sex, exercise, do certain drugs, play video games, gamble, or have positive social interactions, including, and you guessed it, social media. This dopamine release is actually one of the key contributors to how we learn to navigate our world. For example, when we have a goal in mind, consciously or unconsciously, we'll try different things and see what results they produce. And as the results start to match the results that we desired of our goal, it will produce more kicks of dopamine and stronger kicks. These pleasurable kicks tell us that we should be doing more of whatever it is we just did, because it's more likely to give us more of that result that we want. And as we repeat these dopamine-guided behaviors, their associated neural pathways in our brain become stronger. Now, this increases our drive to repeat them even further. If we repeat these actions enough time, they become a habit. And once we have a habit, it's much easier for us to repeat it even more. This is why many self-help books talk about creating healthy habits with the things like work and exercise. But the issue arises when these habits become extreme, especially when they're with a behavior that produces negative side effects. This is what we call an addiction. And this is where the term social media addiction comes from. Now, Justin Rosenstein is currently one of the leads of the productivity software company Asana, and he speaks quite openly about some of the addictive dangers of social media when left unchecked, and he knows them quite intimately. He knows this because back when he was a software engineer at Facebook, he was the one who invented the like button. The initial intention was to allow users to send these little bits of positive social affirmation to each other. And it worked. And it worked incredibly well actually, because Facebook quickly found that their user engagement soared as people started getting these mini hits of dopamine, which then trained them to come back and post even more, hoping that their friends would see it and click the little like button again. These spikes in user engagement were quickly noticed by Twitter, which added their own heart-shaped likes, and then the rest of the platforms followed suit. And thus, the social media like button standard was born, and it became deeply ingrained in much of our online lives. Now, this cycle of validation from likes is all too familiar to us, and it goes like this. We post something, our friends like it. We feel socially validated. Our dopamine kicks in and we feel good. So we post some more to get some more likes, to get some more social validation, to get some more dopamine, and to feel good again. Now, we should hardly beat ourselves up for having these social needs that are so ingrained into our humanity. It's part of who we are. However, one of the big issues that has emerged from having all of this is having a likes counter on each post. Being able to see numerically and exactly how many people have liked a post. If we went on Instagram, for example, and posted a picture of our wedding, we might get 50, 100, 500 likes, maybe more. We feel very much loved by the people around us. But then if we go to one of the pages of one of the leading influencers, such as Kylie Jenner, we'll see that each one of her posts is getting between 5 and 10 million likes from real people around the globe per post. Now, these numbers become a very easy way of comparing our social success in these online platforms. And that comparison can leave us feeling like we're lacking social success, even if in reality we're surrounded by people that care for us. Even some of these platforms' icons can get very aggressive when they feel their numbers are starting to be threatened. For one example, take a little look into the story of the world record egg that happened at the start of this year. We'll post a link to the story in our references. The world record egg was an account whose single photo of an egg on a white background smashed past Kylie Jenner's top photo and ended up earning itself the crown of the top liked Instagram post and eventually the most liked piece of media on the internet. Now, a quick spoiler for the story. Kylie Jenner, who was obviously affected by being pushed off the throne of top Instagram post, she rebutted with her own video of her cracking an egg open on the hot asphalt outside and trying to fry it. Now, this starts to make a bit more sense when you learn that Kylie Jenner is actually earning roughly $1 million US per Instagram post based on her following. Now, whether you consider that a healthy thing or not, doesn't matter. We're all in the same boat here of being affected by this sense of social success on the online world. Now, in the coaching world, there is a model and set of techniques called neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP for short. Now, in an extremely simplified version, it basically focuses on the power of words and how they shape what we believe about ourselves and about the world around us. Now, while there are many different facets to NLP, there's one particular area that is quite relevant to this topic, and that's called meta-programs. And again, very simplified, meta-programs are kind of like parts of our personality. They can include things like whether we are more pleasure-focused or whether we're more pain-avoidant, whether we're someone who focuses more on the big abstract picture of things, or whether we like to get into the nitty-gritty detail. But the very relevant meta-program here is where we get our sense of validation, whether we get it externally from others or whether we get it internally from ourselves. Now, when we're talking about that feeling the need to continuously check how many likes our posts are getting, we're talking more about being sensitive to external validation. In the extreme, this is where a social media dependency can become a real issue in our lives about how we positively or negatively perceive ourselves and the things that we're sharing. Now, if this does resonate with you, don't stress too much, because there's two additional caveats to this. Number one, meta programs are contextual. Now, this means just because you might seek external validation on social media, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need it in all areas of your life. And number two, once you understand where you sit on this spectrum between internal and external validation, you can actually make a conscious effort to change it if you want to. Now, unfortunately, in the external world, online and offline, it's made up of a whole world of different forces that are constantly pushing people in different directions. Now, this means that the external validation that we're trying to get from these people can be very inconsistent, it can be unstable, and it really won't validate or reward you in proportion to the amount of effort, work, or growth that you're actually making. Now, this is where it can be important to increase our ability to validate ourselves and our work internally, and we will look at one way to do that. However, before we do, there's just a little bit more of this whole picture that we need to paint. As you've been following our thread here, the easy logical conclusion to come to is to adopt a fully internal attitude, an attitude of, I don't give a what anyone else thinks of me and my work. And while this can sound great and easy in theory, in reality, we do actually live in a world where our actions affect other people, that we do actually depend on cooperating with others to earn money, to make friends, and to share resources. Now, if we're running a business or working a job, we also need to be especially aware of how our customers are experiencing our services. And simply as a human, being integrated into the wider world around us is actually one big part of living a healthy and fulfilling life. This is where having the ability to process external validation comes in useful for us. But the problem occurs when we put all of our self-value in the hands of this chaotic external world. So it's in finding the balance between the two, the internal and the external, almost like an art form, that we can find the stable sense of self-worth that comes from the internal validation and the healthy sense of integration with others that comes with the external validation. And there are a number of different ways to do this, but one technique that we'll explore today is to develop your own internal KPIs. Now, KPIs are a term you've probably most certainly heard from the business world. It stands for Key Performance Indicators. In other words, it's basically just a measure or a counter of how well you are actually doing your job. If you're a salesperson, for example, your KPI might be to make 20 sales each week. And if you're reaching that 20, great, give yourself a pat on the back, you've done a great job. Ooh, but if you get less than that 20, tut tut, you need to lift your game. Now, as much as we like to believe that making sales are directly proportional to our sales ability as a person, there are actually a whole lot of external factors that come into whether a potential customer will make the purchase or not. And this is a KPI that is not under our direct control. So we would call it an external KPI. When you're looking at your latest Instagram post or Facebook post and you're hoping that it'll crack the 100 likes mark, this is also an external KPI. Internal KPIs, on the other hand, they measure things that are under our direct control. Now, these are things like going to the gym 3 times a week, spending 30 minutes a day reading a book, working on your piece of art for 4 hours today. Internal KPIs are not focused on the result that the outside world will give you, but it's focused on you yourself stepping up and doing your part. Now, the most effective internal KPIs are the value-driven ones. And this can be great to use in your business as well as in your personal life. Because even if the external world, the market, is in this weird stranger dip, or you're not getting much feedback, or whatever the issue is, you can still be hitting your internal value-driven KPIs. And you'll find that protects you against a lot of the demoralization that comes with either negative or lack of feedback. Now, we did discuss values and one way to help investigate yours in the previous episode of Redlily Radio, if you're intrigued. And in our coaching sessions, it is the first thing we'll invest a decent amount of time into really working out. But once you know what your core values are, what you're passionate about, what brings you fulfillment, then it really opens up space for these consistent internal ways of self-validation. The ironic and kind of great thing is, as you are able to develop your own internal KPIs and gradually get better at hitting them consistently, it can actually help you develop a sense of self-confidence, which in turn develops your resilience. And then as your resilience gets stronger, it means you're able to bounce back from the small or large setbacks that life can sometimes throw your way, which means that you're actually able to stick in the game longer. And it's this sticking in the game longer, learning and growing and adapting along the way, which can often be the game changer for reaching those external goals that we talked about. And this can happen whether it's about developing a successful business, or whether it's building an audience for your art, or whether it's breaking through some of the other boundaries that you've found in your life. And additionally, developing this healthy sense of self-validation and direction also will help you to see when the environment you're in is actually kind of incompatible for you, when it's an unhelpful one for your growth and your achievement. And it can help you to identify when a new environment might actually be a better fit for you. And so it really is worth taking some time after this podcast to think about how it is that you feel validation in your life, whether you get it externally or internally. It's worth thinking about what it is that you really value and what it is that you really want to achieve, and how you can set up these measures like these internal KPIs as well to consistently know when you're doing a great job for where you are, regardless of how many likes you're currently getting on Instagram, regardless of how many shares you're currently getting on Facebook, regardless of the criticism and the compliments or the lack of any feedback that you're currently getting from the world around you. And so you can continue walking through the countless winds that are blowing through the external world, continue walking strong, resilient, focused, and continue growing. Redlily Radio is produced as part of Redlily Coaching, where we leverage one-on-one coaching, technologies, and this podcast to help grow your personal direction and empower your life in our increasingly technological world. For more information, visit www.redlilycoaching.com.